Imagine this. It's the night you've waited for your entire life. Your skin is still humming from the adrenaline of crossing that stage. Flashbulbs have faded, the crowd has vanished, and the cap you tossed into the air has already landed somewhere you'll never find again. You're 17, maybe 18, on the edge of something new. The world feels enormous. Your future is out there waiting, and you're surrounded by the same classmates you've known for years. But tonight, they all feel like strangers wearing familiar masks. The after party is where the real memories are supposed to be made. Laughter, music, headlights cutting across empty fields, half-sincere goodbyes drowned out by drunk declarations of forever. This is what you've been told your whole life, that this is your last perfect night before reality sets in. But what if that's the first lie? What if the moment everyone steps off that stage, something else steps in? What if graduation isn't a clean break from childhood, but a ritual, a kind of passage not into freedom, but into something much darker? There are things no one tells you about graduation night. No one tells you about the girl who drove away from the bonfire and was never seen again, even though her phone kept sending messages for weeks afterward. No one tells you about the boy who confessed, in slurred words and terrified glances, that someone had followed him from the ceremony, not a stranger, but a classmate who'd died 6 months earlier. No one tells you that the finality everyone celebrates might just be the beginning of something unexplainable. Because here's the truth hiding in plain sight. The threshold between adolescence and adulthood is a strange, fragile place. You think you've survived high school. You think the worst is over. But at the edge of childhood, the veil is thin, and some things are drawn to that. There's a reason ancient cultures turned coming of age into ceremonies drenched in symbolism and blood. Rites of passage were once sacred and terrifying. The old tribes knew what we've forgotten, that transformation comes with a cost, that the self you shed doesn't just disappear. Sometimes it lingers, sometimes it becomes something else. So why do we think we're immune? Why do we act like our sanitized version of graduation, with rented gowns and Pinterest parties, can protect us from the primal undercurrents still running beneath it? Why do so many people experience their most haunting moment on the night they're supposed to feel most free? Maybe you remember something, too. A weird silence in the back of the bus ride home. A stranger who appeared in the group photo but wasn't at the party. A text message from a classmate you could swear was already gone. Or maybe it's just the way you felt when the music died down and you realized the night wasn't over, and you weren't alone. Graduation is supposed to mark the end of a chapter, but what if, for some people, it's the beginning of a curse? What if there's something about this night, this liminal, electric moment between childhood and the terrifying, formless vastness of what comes next, that attracts what shouldn't exist? We live our lives pretending that certain boundaries protect us: age, logic, social norms. We pretend ghosts follow rules, that trauma is linear, that evil waits its turn. But what if it doesn't? What if tonight, on the very night you feel safest, surrounded by friends, champagne, celebration, the cracks start to show? What if the one who goes missing isn't just lost, but taken? What if the smiling face next to you in the group photo wasn't supposed to be there at all? What if something ancient, something patient, has been waiting for this night? You'll want to know what happened on those 3 graduation nights. You'll want to believe it's just coincidence. You'll want to tell yourself this could never happen to you. But when the music ends, and the crowd thins, and the light from the fire stops flickering against the trees, you might start to feel it too. That cold certainty, that crawling dread, that you left something behind. Or worse, something followed you home. There's a strange kind of darkness that hides behind milestone moments, the ones we're told should be perfect. Graduation night is one of them. But beneath the joy, beneath the shouting and toasts and tears, there's something else, something we rarely talk about, something we don't even have words for, a kind of psychological fracture. Because what no one warns you about is this: growing up is violent. Not in the way movies or yearbooks make it seem. Not in the gentle symbolism of handing over a diploma. The real violence is internal, an identity crumbling under the weight of who you've been, and the unknown terror of who you're about to become. You spend years building a version of yourself, the quiet one, the funny one, the athlete, the artist, the background character no one notices, and on graduation night, It all gets stripped away, like a mask you didn't even know you were wearing is suddenly yanked off, and you're forced to face the unbearable question, who am I now? That moment, that psychological collapse, is where horror takes root. It's not just fear of the future, it's the fear that you were never real to begin with, and in that identity crisis, something else can step in, something that's been watching, waiting. Mr. Nightmare and storytellers like him tap into this emotional bedrock again and again, not because it's entertaining, but because it's universal. The horror of transformation, the terror of letting go of oneself before another has formed, and the brief moment in between, when you are nothing. And that's the moment when they come. You see, horror isn't just a genre, it's a language. It speaks in symbols, in flickering lights, in footsteps behind you, in the mirror reflection that isn't quite right, but those symbols come from somewhere, from the mind, from real emotional thresholds. Graduation night is exactly that, a night of endings disguised as celebration, a night of grief drowned in alcohol and selfies. Because what you're really doing that night is killing your childhood. And death, even symbolic death, draws attention. There's a reason so many cultures believed in transitional demons, spirits or entities that would appear during moments of great personal change. Puberty, marriage, childbirth, death. These were seen as dangerous times, not just emotionally, but spiritually, because when you're between selves, you're vulnerable, and in that liminal space, something can enter. Graduation night is a modern ritual. We just forgot to make it sacred. We still dress in ceremonial robes, we still gather the tribe, but we replace the sacrifice with confetti and the silence with playlists. And the thing about rituals is, if you don't respect them, they still happen, just without your control. That's when the horror stories start to surface. The girl who saw her doppelganger crying outside the school gym just before midnight, the guy who got a call from himself, the group of friends who found a locked room on campus they swore had never been there, and the message written in blood on the inside wall, "Don't graduate." Most people laugh it off, chalk it up to urban legends, nerves, bad trips. But what if it's not? What if, in the chaos of growing up, something is feeding? Psychologically, this makes sense. The human brain is not designed to process extreme change quickly. Traumatic shifts in identity create what psychologists call ego death, a kind of temporary disintegration of the self. For most, it manifests as depression, anxiety, disconnection, but in the realm of horror, it can manifest as something else. Paranoia, hallucination, projection, or worse, contact. Because there's another truth we're afraid to say out loud. Some of us don't survive graduation night. Not just physically, although that happens, too, more than we care to admit, but psychologically, spiritually. Some people cross that stage and never really come back. They smile in the pictures, they show up to college, but something behind their eyes has gone dark. They're haunted, and they don't know why. And others, they vanish, or they do something that can't be explained, or they see something, just once, that follows them for the rest of their life. A figure in the back row, a voice in the gym, a name carved into a desk that wasn't there yesterday, but is their name. Because horror doesn't wait in the shadows, it waits in the in-between. And graduation night is the ultimate in-between. It's a psychological limbo disguised as a party, a funeral no one calls a funeral. Everyone you know is celebrating, but something inside you is screaming. You don't know why. You laugh anyway. You drink. You take pictures. And later, when you're alone, when the lights are off and the house is quiet, that scream comes back. And it has a voice. Maybe it's yours. Maybe it's not. You don't always notice it at first. The shift is subtle, like a change in temperature that happens so slowly you don't realize you're freezing until your hands won't move. That's what makes it so terrifying. The consequences of what happens on graduation night aren't always loud. They don't always scream. Sometimes, they whisper, and sometimes, they wait. It might start with something small. You misplace your diploma. Your phone screen glitches when you scroll through photos from that night. Like one image refuses to load. The group chat goes quiet, and you feel that silence like a weight pressing on your chest. One classmate changes overnight. They don't text back, or they do, but the tone is wrong. like someone is pretending to be them. And then there's the feeling. A presence in the room when you're alone, a memory that isn't yours, the nagging sensation that you forgot something important, something essential. You open your closet and pause, unsure why you're afraid. You double-check the locks, though no one's ever tried to break in. You tell yourself it's stress, growing pains, nothing more. But something inside you knows. You left a part of yourself back there, and something else took its place. Because the human psyche isn't made to break cleanly. We like to believe we can shed our past like an old skin, but trauma doesn't work like that. The unresolved doesn't disappear, it festers. The things you didn't say, the pain you ignored, the fear you laughed off, they grow teeth in the dark, and if you bury them deep enough, they start to move on their own. This is why so many horror stories don't end on graduation night. They begin there. The boy who joked about seeing a shadow in the rearview mirror driving home from the ceremony, and 6 months later drove his car into a lake, claiming something was waiting in the passenger seat. The girl who started sleepwalking and carving dates into her bedroom wall, dates that matched other classmates' nightmares. The kid who dropped out of college because he couldn't go 5 minutes without hearing his name whispered through static, no matter what dorm he moved into. These aren't just coincidences, they're residues. Emotional fingerprints of something that stepped through. You see, when you break through a layer of the self, there's always debris, and if the transition is violent, emotionally, psychologically, even symbolically, the debris can take shape, sometimes literally, sometimes tragically. That's the part no one wants to believe. We think trauma is linear, that once the party ends, the pain ends too, but real horror doesn't work that way. Real horror waits, and it spreads. It infects your friendships, your sleep, your sense of identity. One day you wake up and realize the person you used to be is watching you. From the mirror, from behind closed eyes, from the photos you keep trying to delete, but always seem to return. Because what if the self you killed on graduation night, the scared version of you, the bullied one, the repressed, anxious, invisible child, didn't die? What if it's still here? And what if it's angry? You try to move on. Everyone tells you it's just anxiety. Growing up is hard, sure, but the weight never lifts. The dream always returns. The house feels off. Your classmates, the ones who were there that night, either distance themselves or dissolve. Suicides, accidents, a string of bad luck that you can't quite explain. A yearbook that feels cursed when you touch it. Eventually, you stop talking about it. Because no one wants to hear the truth, that something supernatural might be psychological, and vice versa. The horror inside you and the horror outside you might be the same thing. And that's the real consequence. It's not just what happens to the people who disappear, it's what happens to the ones who stay. The survivors. The ones who can't forget. They walk through life hollowed out, numb, smiling for photos, showing up to class or work, pretending they're fine, but part of them still lives in that last night. The night something unnameable stared back at them from across the fire, or followed them into the woods, or whispered to them from a bathroom stall they swore had been empty. They never talk about it, but it shows in their eyes. And then there's you. Maybe you weren't there, maybe it wasn't your graduation, but you know the feeling, the invisible bruise, the silence that isn't empty, the wrong memory that keeps returning, even though it's not yours. That's how this spreads. Not through blood, through fear, through echoes. The kind that don't fade, the kind that live in the things we call just stories. But they're not just stories, they're blueprints. And if you've made it this far, you already feel it, don't you? You're remembering something you thought you forgot. You're wondering if that strange thing that happened to your friend that night was really just nerves. You're thinking of the dream you had after your own graduation, the one you never told anyone about, the one you still remember too clearly. These stories you're about to hear, they're not warnings. They're evidence that some threshold should never be crossed without knowing what waits on the other side. You weren't supposed to see it. That thin sliver between what's real and what's not. That fracture behind the mask of a celebration. You were supposed to laugh, to drink, to forget, but you didn't. Something stayed with you, something you couldn't unsee. And now you feel it pressing down on your chest at night, watching from corners, hiding behind your reflection. You tried to bury it, tried to make yourself move on. But here's the secret no one dares say out loud. Moving on is a lie. There's no freedom in forgetting. There's only blindness. The real escape comes from looking directly into the void, the one inside you, and the one that looked back at you that night. Because what if that thing, the presence, the echo, the shape in the photo, wasn't just following you? What if it was a part of you all along? That's the beginning of freedom, not denial, but integration. See, the uprising doesn't happen out there in the world. It happens inside you, in the moment you decide to stop being afraid of your shadow and start listening to it. Because horror isn't about death. It's about identity. And what we're really afraid of is who we'll become if we look too deeply. But the ancient cultures, the old ones, they understood something we've forgotten. They knew that when a person reached the threshold of transformation, they had to pass through fire, through isolation, through a symbolic death, not to destroy the self, but to become whole. You've heard of rites of passage that involve masks, darkness, silence. They weren't theatrical, they were survival mechanisms, ways to protect the psyche during moments when it's most vulnerable to collapse or possession. But we don't have rituals anymore. We have TikToks, flash mobs, senior pranks, hollow laughter that echoes through rented banquet halls and echoey gyms. And so we are left wide open. But now you know, and that knowing is your weapon. The way out starts here. 1. Acknowledge the crack. Stop pretending it didn't happen. The scream in the trees, the face in the mirror, the disjointed memory that loops in your head when you lie awake at 2:37 a.m. Don't run from it. Invite it in. Say, I see you. I know what you are. 2. Reclaim the moment. You don't have to celebrate your trauma, but you do have to own it. If that night marked your undoing, then let it also mark your resurrection. Light your own fire. Rewalk the path. Revisit the gym, the field, the classroom, not to be haunted, but to haunt it back. 3. Speak what you've hidden. What festers becomes a doorway. When you speak the memory aloud, to a friend, to yourself, to the void, it loses its power. Secrets are prisons. Voice is a key. 4. Break the pattern. The thing that followed you, it feeds on cycles, silence, repression, repetition. So disrupt it. Sleep facing a different direction. Rearrange the photos. Burn the yearbook. Go back to the place where it all began. But do something different. Because that's how you reclaim your story. That's how you become the one who leaves the real mark. Not the ghost, not the victim, not the whisper in the locker room, but the uprising, the glitch in the pattern, the one who saw through the lie and said, "No, not tonight, not me, not anymore." And listen carefully, because this next part matters. The system wants you to forget. The social machine relies on it. That's why no one talks about graduation night, why the stories are buried, why we say, it's just nerves, just bad timing, just alcohol. But what if you're not broken? What if you're sensitive, attuned to the cracks that others refuse to see? What if you're the one they warned about? The one who doesn't fold, doesn't forget, the one who hears the scream and walks toward it. Because sometimes, horror doesn't mean you're cursed. It means you've seen the truth and survived it. The ones who truly escape aren't the ones who run. They're the ones who stare into the abyss and walk out with something in their hands. A name, a memory, a weapon. Maybe that's you. You don't need anyone's permission to rewrite the story. You don't need to wait for the right moment. This is the moment. The ghosts of graduation night don't just want to haunt you. They want you to repeat the cycle, to feel small, afraid, silent. But what if, instead, you made them afraid? What if you wore your fear like armor? What if you became the one who enters the story and burns it from the inside out? Because here's the final truth no one tells you. You can't go back to who you were. But you can become someone new, someone who knows how deep the dark goes, and still chooses to shine. There is a silence that comes after the scream, a stillness so complete, it feels like falling into the center of the earth. That's where you are now. And here, in this quiet place, something becomes clear. It was never about the stories, not really. Not the girl who vanished after the bonfire. Not the boy who found his own name carved into a desk he never sat at. Not the friend who swore they saw someone else wearing their skin in the yearbook photo. Those were signs, symptoms, clues in a language we were never taught to read. The real story is deeper, darker, more honest than we're usually allowed to be. Because the most disturbing truth about graduation night is this: you're not afraid of what's out there. You're afraid of what's inside you. The rage you buried to survive high school. The grief no one saw when you smiled through your speech. The parts of yourself you cut off just to fit in. You thought you left them behind, but they didn't leave you. They watched from the cracks. They waited for the moment when your identity crumbled, when the applause faded, the future loomed, and you were too tired, too drunk, too exposed to hold the mask anymore. And in that moment, in that gap between who you were and who you're supposed to be, you were split open. That's what horror really is. Not monsters, not shadows. It's truth we weren't ready to face. It's the soul, screaming from behind a lifetime of pretending. And here's the final, most devastating realization. Graduation doesn't free you. It reveals you. You weren't just walking away from childhood that night. You were walking into a house with no walls, where everything you've ever hidden comes home to live. And that's where the stories begin. Because for the first time, you start to feel them crawling beneath the surface. Not ghosts, not demons. Memories. Raw, untouched, wild. The real you. The you that screamed in the bathroom and told no one. The you that stood in the corner of the dance floor, wishing you could disappear. The you that cried at 3 a.m. when the college acceptance never came. The you that stood in the mirror, trying to believe you were enough. That's the figure in the photograph. That's the presence in the hallway. That's the scream in the woods. You're not being haunted by something outside you. You're being haunted by the pieces of yourself you refuse to claim. And what no one tells you is, that's the most sacred haunting there is. Because it means you're ready. Ready to stop pretending. Ready to stop chasing someone else's version of success. Ready to stop fearing the dark and start walking through it. This is your ritual. The one no one gave you. The one you had to survive to see. And now, with everything stripped away, you're left with the only truth that ever mattered. You are not what happened to you. You are what you do with it. You are the silence after the scream. The fire after the fall. The one who made it out, not unchanged, but undefeated. The others will forget. They'll post their smiling photos and say it was the best night of their lives. They'll never speak about the strange things they felt, or saw, or dreamed. But you'll know. And because you know, you'll never walk the same again. You'll look deeper. You'll ask better questions. You'll find the others, the quiet ones, the haunted ones, the ones with eyes like yours, and you'll recognize them. Not as victims, not as survivors, but as truth bearers. The ones who walked through the fire, the ones who didn't look away, the ones who faced the monster and realized they were never the prey. You'll still have bad nights. You'll still wake up sometimes and hear the scream, but it won't terrify you anymore. It will remind you that you're alive, that you saw the lie and lived to tell it, that on the night the world celebrated your beginning, you finally met yourself. And that version of you, whole, broken, luminous and real, is still here. Watching, waiting, smiling. You didn't lose yourself that night. You found the one who's been hiding all along. And now you carry that truth into the world, not as a curse, but as a light.